Part 4. The second atomic bomb, August 9th, 1945. It was 11 a.m. and Yamaguchi was standing in a meeting room on the top floor of Mitsubishi's Nagasaki office. The windows were open, letting in the late summer heat. His head was still bandaged from Hiroshima, his burns aching under the cloth. He was in the middle of explaining again to his supervisor how a single bomb had destroyed Hiroshima. He insisted, one plane, one bomb. It erased the city. You must evacuate. And then, just like 3 days earlier, a blinding white light filled the sky. Instinct took over. Down. Yamaguchi screamed, throwing himself to the floor. A fraction of a second later, the second atomic bomb, Fat Man, detonated over Nagasaki. He was 1.9 miles from ground zero. The shockwave tore through the building, shattering glass and collapsing parts of the roof. Everyone in the room was thrown to the floor, stunned and coughing. Dust and smoke filled the air. Yamaguchi's bandages were blown away, his wounds reopened, and fresh burns marked his already scorched body. Yet somehow, again, he was alive. Around him, injured colleagues groaned in pain. Those near the windows had been cut to ribbons by flying glass. When the chaos settled enough to move, Yamaguchi staggered through the ruined streets toward his home. The city was a nightmare. Buildings reduced to skeletons, fires raging, the sky turned to sickly yellow-brown haze. Part 5. Finding his family. His home was gone. The small wooden house he'd shared with Asoko and their infant son had been flattened. His heart pounded as he searched the streets, calling their names. Last, he found them in a nearby air raid shelter, alive. Hisako had been out buying medical supplies when the bomb hit, and she'd seen the flash from a distance. Their son was unhurt. The relief was so overwhelming that for a moment Yamaguchi forgot his own pain. He held them close, trembling, knowing how close he'd come to losing them. Twice. Part 6. Aftermath. The days that followed were an endless blur of smoke, heat, and death. Radiation sickness began to creep in. Fever, hair loss, vomiting. Many who had survived the initial blast didn't live to see the end of the week. Yamaguchi somehow endured. His burns slowly healed, though the scars never faded. The ringing in his ears never left. He became one of the very few people in history officially recognized by the Japanese government as having survived both atomic bombings. A near hibakusha. For the rest of his life, he carried the memories of those 2 days. In the faces of those who didn't survive, he spoke often about the bombs. Not with anger, but with a quiet urgency, to make sure such weapons were never used again. When asked how he endured, he simply said, "I was lucky twice." And so, Tsutomu Yamaguchi, the man who faced the end of the world twice, lived to tell his story. Not out of pride, but out of duty. He wanted the world to remember what he had seen and what it cost. Because history isn't just something in books, it's written in scars. In the lives of those who survived, and in the silence of those who didn't. If you believe these stories must never be forgotten, then join me here. There are so many more true stories, darker, stranger, and more unbelievable than fiction, waiting to be told. Subscribe now, and let's uncover them together. Imagine surviving the most devastating weapon mankind had ever created. Not once, but twice. This is not a myth, not a rumor whispered across history. This is the life of one man. A man who saw 2 cities erased from the earth in blinding flashes, who walked through fire, who felt the sky rain death, and lived to tell the tale. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we dive into some of the most incredible, shocking, and sometimes unbelievable true stories from history. And today, we're going to Japan in 1945 to follow the footsteps of Tsutomu Yamaguchi, the man who survived both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This isn't just a story about survival. It's about impossible odds, human resilience, and the strange way fate sometimes refuses to let go. Part 1. The man before the bomb, the summer of 1945, was suffocating in Japan. The war was in its final desperate stages. Its food was scarce, cities were scarred by bombing raids, and rumors whispered of an American weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was 29 years old. He worked as a draftsman for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. a job that had him traveling between cities to oversee technical designs for oil tankers. That August, his assignment had taken him from his home city of Nagasaki to Hiroshima, where he had spent the last 3 months away from his wife and infant son. On August 6th, he had packed his bag. His work was done. All that was left was one final morning meeting and then the train ride home. The sky over Hiroshima that morning was a flawless blue. There was nothing to hint at what was about to happen. At around 8:15 a.m., Yamaguchi was walking toward the shipyard when he heard the drone of a single aircraft overhead. Unusual, since most American bombing raids came with dozens of planes. He looked up. Silver B-29 bomber glided almost peacefully through the air. Then, a small dark object fell from its belly, tethered to a parachute. He had just enough time to think, "That's strange," before the world turned white. Part 2. The first atomic bomb, a flash brighter than the sun, swallowed the sky. For a split second, everything in Yamaguchi's vision was pure, blinding white. Then came the heat, a searing wave that ripped the air from his lungs and burned the exposed skin on his arms and face. He had been about 2 miles from the bomb's hypocenter, close enough to be thrown off his feet by the shockwave. The blast shattered windows, tore walls from buildings, and sent shards of glass slicing into him. His left eardrum ruptured, skin on his face and forearms blistered instantly. When he opened his eyes again, the Hiroshima he had known just seconds earlier was gone. The streets were covered in rubble, houses were flattened. Flames leapt from shattered rooftops. People, some naked, their clothes burned away, staggered past, skin hanging in strips, eyes clouded and blind. Yamaguchi stumbled toward what was left of the shipyard, dazed and half-deaf, trying to comprehend the nightmare around him.
Oh.
The air smelled of burning wood and something else, something far worse. Burning flesh. Somehow, he found 2 of his coworkers, both injured, both as stunned as he was. They moved together through the ruin, stepping over debris and past corpses. In every direction, the city was on fire. The heat was suffocating, and the sky had turned an unnatural, boiling orange. They made their way to an air raid shelter on the edge of the city and stayed there through the night, listening to the distant roar of the flames and the cries of survivors calling for water. Part 3. The journey to Nagasaki the next morning, August 7th. Yamaguchi was determined to get home to Nagasaki. His burns were raw, his hearing in one ear was gone, and his body ached from the blast. But all he could think about was his wife and his little boy. Hiroshima was barely a city anymore. The train station had been reduced to twisted metal, but somehow, trains were still running in a limited capacity. The journey was surreal. The countryside looked untouched, peaceful, a sharp contrast to the hellscape he had just walked out of. By the time he reached Nagasaki, it was the evening of August 7th. His wife Hisako wept when she saw him. She tended to his burns, wrapping his arms and face in cloth, trying to process the horror he described. And here's where fate showed its strange, cruel sense of irony. The next morning, August 8th, Yamaguchi went to Mitsubishi's Nagasaki office to report what had happened in Hiroshima. He tried to explain the unimaginable destruction he had seen, the single bomb that had erased a city. His coworkers and supervisor listened politely, but didn't quite believe him. The idea of one weapon doing that much damage was simply too hard to accept. Then came the morning of August 9th.